The base has been empty for 6 weeks, so Staff Sergeant Daniel Mercer knows the barking behind the wall is impossible. He stands alone in the east wing of Camp Ashford Annex with one gloved hand resting against cold concrete, listening as the last echo fades into a silence too complete to be natural. Outside, a November storm rolls in from the Atlantic, pushing hard wind across the abandoned training grounds and rattling loose sheet metal somewhere beyond the boarded windows. The air inside the building smells of salt, wet dust, old canvas, and the faint metallic breath of pipes that have not carried warm water in months. Daniel raises his flashlight. Its narrow beam slides over peeling paint, empty brackets, and a faded sign that still reads K9 Operations, though every kennel, office, and storage room in this section was cleared before the base shut down. At least, that is what the paperwork says. 3 short barks sound again. Then silence. Daniel does not move. He has spent most of his adult life learning the difference between noise and a message. This is a message. His gray-green eyes trace the wall from floor to ceiling. No door. No vent large enough for a dog. No room listed behind it on the inspection map folded inside his field jacket. Only 12 feet of stained concrete beneath a dead emergency light. He keys the radio clipped to his shoulder. Control, this is Mercer. I have possible animal activity in Building 7, East Corridor. Static answers him. He tries again. Nothing but a thin electrical hiss. The storm must be interfering with the portable repeater, or perhaps the old building is swallowing the signal. Camp Ashford has a way of holding sound. Even empty, it seems to remember boots, whistles, shouted commands, steel bowls striking kennel doors, and the steady rhythm of dogs running drills at dawn. Daniel remembers more than he wants to. He lowers the radio and steps closer. The barking has stopped, but a softer sound takes its place. A scrape. Pause. Another scrape. Claws against something solid. Easy, he says, his voice low enough that the room almost absorbs it. I hear you. The scratching stops. Daniel presses his ear to the wall. The concrete is cold through the fabric of his cap. For 1 second there is nothing. Then he hears breathing on the other side. Slow. Uneven. Close enough to feel imagined warmth against the stone. His jaw tightens. No animal should be here. The last K9 team left more than a month ago, and he personally checked the transfer log before driving through the front gate that afternoon. 23 dogs reassigned. 4 retired to handlers. 2 sent to veterinary recovery in Virginia. Every collar number accounted for. Every kennel marked empty. Daniel takes 1 step back and sweeps the flashlight toward the floor. Dust lies thick along the base of the wall, untouched except for a narrow dark line beneath a rusted utility panel. He crouches. The panel has been painted over so many times its edges have nearly disappeared. 1 screw is missing. Another hangs loose. Daniel pulls a multi-tool from his pocket and works the remaining screws free. They fall into his palm with soft clicks. Behind the panel is a shallow maintenance space, crowded with dead wires and a narrow passage that vanishes into blackness. Not enough room for a grown man. Maybe enough room for a dog to reach with a paw. Come on, Daniel whispers. Give me something. A faint whine answers. It is not fearful. It sounds tired. Then something shifts in the darkness. Metal touches concrete. Once. Twice. A small object slides out through the opening and stops beside Daniel's boot. He freezes. For a moment, he only looks at it. A dog tag, dulled by age, attached to a short length of broken chain. Lightning flashes beyond the boarded windows, turning the corridor white for the briefest instant. Daniel reaches down and picks it up. The metal is warm. That makes no sense. Nothing in this building is warm. He wipes away the dust with his thumb. The engraved letters emerge slowly beneath the beam of his flashlight. Mercer. His own last name. The corridor seems to narrow around him. The storm outside grows louder, but Daniel hears something older beneath it. 2 boys tapping on the wall between their bedrooms in a small house outside Wilmington. 3 quick knocks followed by 2 slow ones, their private signal when. One of them was scared or needed the other to stay awake. Daniel closes his fingers around the tag. Nathan, he says before he can stop himself. The name leaves his mouth like breath in winter. No answer comes. Only 3 short barks from behind the wall. A pause. Then 2 long ones. Daniel stands so quickly his shoulder strikes the concrete, but he barely feels it. His flashlight trembles in his hand. 6 years have passed since anyone used that signal. 6 years since his younger brother's belongings were sealed in a government box and delivered without explanation. 6 years since Daniel decided some doors were safer left closed. Now, somewhere inside an abandoned Marine base scheduled for demolition at sunrise, a German shepherd is calling to him in the language of his childhood. Daniel stares at the wall, the dog tag pressed into his palm, and understands with sudden, quiet certainty that whatever is trapped on the other side has not been waiting for rescue. It has been waiting for him. Daniel keeps the dog tag closed inside his fist as the wind presses against the boarded windows and makes the old building groan. For several seconds, he does not move. The name Mercer feels heavier than the metal itself. It carries his father's silence, his mother's prayers, Nathan's easy laugh, and 6 years of questions Daniel has never allowed anyone to ask. The dog behind the wall does not bark again. It waits. So does he. At last, Daniel slips the tag into the breast pocket of his field jacket and turns toward the corridor. He needs tools, a working radio, and a clearer look at the original floor plans. The demolition crew is scheduled to arrive at 7 the next morning, less than 12 hours away. Until now, the assignment had seemed simple. Walk the buildings, confirm that no equipment remained, lock the outer gates, and sign the final closure documents. It was the kind of task given to a man already halfway out the door. Daniel had not objected. In 5 days, his service in the United States Marine Corps would officially end. No ceremony, no crowded hall, no speech from a commanding officer. He had declined all of it. He planned to turn in his identification card, load 2 canvas bags into his pickup truck, and drive north until the coast disappeared from the rearview mirror. He had not told anyone where he was going because he did not know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one would call him Staff Sergeant Mercer and expect him to know what came next. Camp Ashford Annex had once been loud enough to shake sleep from the bones. Recruits ran the perimeter before sunrise. Instructors called cadence over the gulls. Military working dogs crossed the training yard in disciplined lines, their paws kicking sand from the packed earth. Now the base sits beneath a darkening sky like a town abandoned after Sunday service. The barracks windows are covered. The flagpole stands bare. Rainwater gathers in the cracks of the parade ground, reflecting the pale security lights that still burn near the main gate. Daniel steps outside Building 7 and pulls the collar of his jacket higher against the wind. His flashlight sweeps across a row of empty kennels. Their steel doors hang open. A few faded nameplates remain bolted above them, but the lettering has been scraped away by salt and time. He passes a rusted water bowl turned upside down near the fence. Beside it lies a red rubber training ball, split along one side. He pauses. Nathan used to carry one just like it in the pocket of his uniform, though Daniel had never understood why. When asked, Nathan only smiled and said a soldier should always have something worth coming back for. Daniel had assumed he meant a joke, the way younger brothers often made serious things sound light. He enters the administration building through a side door and finds the inspection office exactly as Captain Rebecca Hayes left it earlier that afternoon. A metal desk stands beneath a humming emergency lamp. 3 boxes of transfer records sit against the wall. On top of the desk rests a thick binder labeled Final Asset Clearance. Daniel removes his wet gloves and opens it. Every page bears signatures, dates, and inventory numbers. Vehicles removed. Medical supplies transferred. Training equipment auctioned or reassigned. 29 military working dog files marked complete. He reads the number twice. The document he checked in his truck listed 29. 23 reassigned, for retired to handlers, and 2 transferred for medical recovery. All accounted for. Yet an animal is breathing behind a sealed wall less than 200 yards away. Daniel turns to the original construction plans spread beneath the binder. The paper is brittle at the edges. Building 7 appears as a long rectangle divided into offices, kennels, storage rooms, and 1 veterinary examination space. The east wall backs against an old utility corridor. Nothing else. No hidden room. No sealed enclosure. No reason for a German shepherd to be trapped there. He lifts the transparent renovation sheet placed over the original plan. A faint pencil mark appears near the east corridor, nearly erased. A narrow square. No label. Someone has drawn a line through it and written closed in the margin. Daniel feels the same cold pressure gather beneath his ribs that he used to feel before opening a door in unfamiliar territory. Not fear. Recognition. The knowledge that a quiet thing has been arranged too carefully. He reaches for the desk telephone, but the receiver gives no tone. His mobile telephone shows 1 week bar of service, then none. The storm has moved closer. Thunder rolls over the water and settles into the empty buildings like distant machinery. Daniel opens a locked cabinet and finds a heavy pry bar, a coil of rope, 2 portable lanterns, and a battery-powered radio. He tests the radio. The display lights, but only static comes through. He sets it beside the plans and studies the pencil mark again. Captain Hayes had warned him not to stay after dark. The base had unstable wiring, flooded crawl spaces, and sections scheduled for immediate removal. She had offered to send another Marine with him. Daniel refused before she finished the sentence. He had spent years believing solitude was the same thing as control. It asked nothing of him. It did not remind him of the people he had failed to bring home. But the sound behind that wall has changed the shape of the night. Daniel gathers the tools into an old canvas bag and carries the plans under his arm. As he steps back into the rain, the emergency lights across Camp Ashford flicker once, then go dark in a slow line from the gate toward Building 7. The base disappears section by section until only Daniel's flashlight remains. Across the training yard, from inside the blackened building, 3 short barks rise above the storm. A pause follows, then 2 long ones. Daniel tightens his grip on the canvas bag and begins walking toward the sound, no longer like a man finishing his last assignment, but like a brother answering a call he should have heard years ago. The rain follows Daniel into Building 7, ticking softly from the shoulders of his field jacket as he pushes the swollen door closed behind him. Without the emergency lights, the corridor feels narrower than before. His flashlight cuts a pale tunnel through the dark, catching dust in the air and the silver edges of abandoned door frames. Somewhere inside the walls, old pipes click as they cool. The sound is small, but in the silence it carries like a whispered warning. Daniel sets the canvas bag on the floor beside the rusted utility panel and unfolds the construction plans across an overturned bench. The square marked in pencil lies behind the east wall, no more than 8 feet wide and perhaps 12 feet deep. Too small for an office. Too large for a service shaft. There is no listed entrance. He studies the concrete, searching for seams beneath layers of paint. His beam passes over a row of framed photographs still hanging crooked near the ceiling. Most have faded into gray shapes, but one image holds enough color to stop him. A younger Nathan stands at the edge of the K-9 training yard, sunlight bright on his close-cropped hair, one hand resting on the shoulder of a German shepherd. The dog is lean and alert, with a dark sable coat and a small tear at the tip of the left ear. Nathan is smiling. Not the polite smile he wore for official photographs, but the wide, uneven grin Daniel remembers from childhood, when they raced bicycles down the gravel road behind their house and came home covered in mud. Daniel steps closer. A brass plate beneath the photograph reads Corporal Nathan Mercer and K-9 Ranger, Advanced Detection Course, 2020. The name Ranger settles heavily in the empty hall. Daniel had never seen the picture. He had never heard the name. After Nathan died, the box delivered to their mother contained folded uniforms, service ribbons, a watch, and letters Daniel could not bring himself to read. There was no leash, no collar, no mention of a dog. He touches the edge of the frame with 2 fingers. The glass is cold and filmed with dust. "You should have told me," he says. The words sound unfair the moment they leave him. Nathan had tried to tell him many things. Daniel had simply been too busy pretending he was strong enough not to listen. A memory rises without permission. Nathan standing in Daniel's kitchen during his final leave, turning the red rubber training ball over in his hands. He had spoken about a dog that could recognize fear before a person admitted it, a dog that waited outside the shower room when thunder made the windows shake, a dog that refused to eat until every Marine in the unit returned from the field. Daniel had answered while sorting mail. He had nodded without looking up. Now he understands Nathan had not been telling a story. He had been introducing family. Daniel lowers his hand. In the photograph, Ranger's amber eyes are fixed not on the camera, but on Nathan. Trust without hesitation. Loyalty without calculation. Daniel knows that look. He has seen it only a few times in his life, and every time it belonged to someone who believed he would not let them down. His chest tightens. The dog tag in his pocket seems to press against his heart. 6 years earlier, Daniel had been serving 2 states away when Nathan called late one night. Daniel missed the first call, then the second. By the time he returned it, Nathan spoke lightly, saying there was nothing important, only that he wanted to hear his brother's voice before an early training transfer. Daniel had promised to call the next day. The next day never came. Since then, every unanswered telephone has sounded like a door closing. He tells himself that one missed conversation cannot change a life. Some nights, he almost believes it. 3 short barks break the memory. 2 long barks follow. Weaker now, Daniel turns toward the wall. "I am here," he says. This time the words are not meant for Nathan. He kneels beside the utility opening and shines the flashlight into the narrow space. Dead wires twist along the concrete. About 4 feet in, something catches the light. A shallow metal bowl. Beyond it, 2 amber eyes appear and vanish. Daniel's breath stills. "Ranger." A soft whine answers. The dog knows the name. Daniel reaches into the opening, but the space narrows before his hand can pass through. He withdraws and examines the wall again. Near the floor, beneath peeling paint, he finds a faint vertical seam. Then another. A concealed panel, sealed from the corridor side. He runs his fingers along the edge until he feels a recessed latch packed with dust. It does not move. Daniel opens the canvas bag and takes out the pry bar. Before he uses it, he places his palm flat against the concrete. On the other side, claws touch the wall at the same height. For one quiet second, man and dog remain separated by only a few inches of stone and 6 years of silence. "I missed him too," Daniel whispers. Ranger gives one low breath against the wall. Daniel sets the pry bar into the seam and pulls. The old panel groans, but does not open. Dust drifts down around his boots. He braces himself and tries again. Somewhere deep inside the hidden room, metal shifts, followed by the faint drag of a chain. Daniel stops. The photograph behind him trembles on its hook. Nathan's smiling face catches the flashlight beam, and Daniel finally understands that this building is not forcing him to return to the past. It is asking whether he will leave someone there again. Daniel leans his weight into the pry bar again, and this time the hidden panel gives with a long, reluctant sigh. The sound travels through the corridor and disappears into the dark rooms beyond. Dust falls in a soft curtain. Rust flakes scatter across the floor. A narrow gap opens between the concrete frame and the steel-backed panel, releasing a stale breath of air that smells of damp fur, old paper, and something faintly medicinal. Daniel lowers the bar and shines his flashlight through the opening. The beam reaches only a few feet before the darkness swallows it. "Ranger," he says. At first, nothing moves. Then the amber eyes return, steady and watchful. The dog does not rush forward. He remains several feet inside the hidden space, body low, one forepaw set ahead of the other, as though he is guarding a line Daniel cannot yet see. The chain drags softly when he shifts. Daniel widens the opening inch by inch, careful not to make sudden noise. The steel panel scrapes against the floor until there is enough room for him to step through sideways. He lifts one portable lantern from the canvas bag, switches it on, and sets it just inside the room. Warm light spreads across cracked tile, a narrow cot, an overturned food container, and a rusted pipe disappearing into the wall. The space is larger than the plans suggest, perhaps 10 feet wide and 15 feet long. It has no windows. A single vent near the ceiling carries the distant sound of rain. Ranger stands near the far side. He is thinner than the photograph, his sable coat dull with dust, but the tear in his left ear is unmistakable. Age has silvered the fur around his muzzle. His ribs show beneath the coat, yet his posture remains disciplined. He watches Daniel with the calm focus of a dog trained to wait for meaning. "Easy boy," Daniel says. "I am not here to take anything from you." Ranger's ears lift at the voice. Daniel kneels and places both hands where the dog can see them. He does not stare directly into Ranger's eyes. He turns slightly, offering space instead of pressure. The old lessons return from years spent around working dogs, though he has never been a handler. Let the animal choose the distance. Let trust arrive on its own time. Ranger takes one slow step forward. The chain tightens. Daniel follows it with the flashlight. One end is clipped to the dog's collar. The other is fastened to a steel ring in the floor beside a battered storage cabinet. The chain is long enough for Ranger to reach the cot and the empty bowl, but not the doorway. Daniel's jaw sets, though his voice remains gentle. All right, I see it. He removes a canteen from his bag and pours water into a shallow plastic tray. The sound catches Ranger's attention. His tongue touches his nose, but he does not approach the water. Instead, he turns toward the storage cabinet and gives one quiet whine. Daniel slides the tray closer. Drink first. Ranger looks at him, then at the cabinet. He does not move. Daniel notices the dog's attention is not scattered. It is fixed, deliberate, even weakened. Ranger is trying to complete something before accepting help. Daniel shifts toward the cabinet. Ranger steps in front of it and lowers his head. A warning, but not a threat. Daniel stops. You want me to look, but not yet. Ranger's ears twitch. Daniel studies the room more carefully. On the wall above the cot are 5 faded marks made in pencil, each one crossed through except the last. Beside them is a small drawing of a circle with 2 short lines beneath it. It looks childish until Daniel recognizes the shape. A ball over 2 parallel tracks. Nathan used to draw it on notes when he wanted Daniel to follow him somewhere. Their private symbol for come find me. Daniel's breath catches. He reaches into his pocket and removes the dog tag. Ranger sees the metal and becomes completely still. Daniel holds it where the lantern can touch the engraved name. Mercer, he says. Daniel Mercer. The dog's gaze lifts from the tag to Daniel's face. For several seconds, neither moves. Then Ranger takes one step forward, chain scraping over tile. He sniffs the air. Another step. Daniel remains kneeling. The dog comes close enough to smell the sleeve of his field jacket, then the hand holding the tag. His nose touches the metal. A tremor moves through his shoulders. Not fear. Recognition. Ranger closes his eyes for the briefest moment and presses his forehead against Daniel's knuckles. The contact is light, almost uncertain, yet it carries the weight of a promise remembered. Daniel swallows hard. He was my brother, he whispers. Ranger breathes against his hand. Then, as if answering the only question that matters, the German shepherd taps the floor 3 times with one paw. Pause. 2 more taps. Daniel feels the room turn quiet around them. The signal is not an accident. It is not memory playing tricks in an empty building. Ranger knows. He rises slowly and reaches for the chain clip. The clasp is stiff with corrosion, but after a moment it opens. The chain falls away. Daniel steps back and leaves the doorway clear. You can go. Ranger looks toward the corridor, where rain-cooled air moves through the gap. Freedom is only a few feet away. He could reach it in seconds. Instead, he turns from the open door, walks to the battered cabinet, and places one paw against its lower panel. Then he looks back at Daniel. The message is simple. Rescue is not what he has been waiting for. Daniel picks up the lantern and follows. Daniel carries the lantern closer to the battered cabinet, while Ranger keeps one paw against the lower panel. The metal door is dented near the hinge and streaked with rust, but the lock is newer than everything around it. Daniel notices that immediately. The cabinet may have been forgotten, but someone once made certain it stayed closed. He sets the lantern on the floor and runs his fingers over the keyhole. No key, no label, only a strip of faded red tape wrapped around the handle. Ranger watches every movement. His breathing is shallow, yet his attention never breaks. You have been guarding this, Daniel says. Ranger gives one soft sound in his throat, neither bark nor whine, just enough to confirm that the cabinet matters. Daniel picks up the pry bar and slides the flat in beneath the latch. Before he pulls, Ranger steps closer and touches his wrist with his nose. Daniel pauses. The dog looks toward the empty water tray, then back at the cabinet. Daniel understands. Ranger is not refusing help out of fear. He is refusing to leave before the task is complete. It is discipline carried beyond hunger, beyond exhaustion, beyond reason. Daniel lowers the pry bar. All right, he says quietly. We do this together. He pours fresh water into the tray and places it beside Ranger's front paws. This time, he does not order the dog to drink. He sits on the cold tile and waits. The storm presses rain through the vent in a fine mist. Somewhere above them, loose metal knocks against the roof in an uneven rhythm. Ranger looks at the cabinet for several seconds longer, then finally lowers his head to the water. He drinks slowly at first, each swallow careful, as though the body has forgotten what relief feels like. Daniel keeps his eyes on the floor, offering the dog privacy. When Ranger finishes, he remains standing over the empty tray, and Daniel notices the slight tremble in his back legs. He reaches for a folded blanket from the cot and places it nearby. Ranger does not lie down. Instead, he returns to the cabinet and presses his shoulder against it. Daniel rises. The lock gives after 2 controlled pulls. The latch snaps open with a dull metallic click. Ranger steps back at once. Daniel opens the door. Inside are 3 shelves crowded with items that do not belong together. A folded canine harness, 2 sealed veterinary packets, a cracked leather leash, several training logs bound with twine, a small handheld recorder wrapped in a clear plastic bag. On the top shelf rests a red rubber ball, faded almost pink with age. Daniel stares at it. The split along one side matches the ball he saw outside near the kennels. For a moment, he sees Nathan in the kitchen again, turning that same shape between his palms while Daniel sorted mail and pretended to listen. The memory feels closer now, not like something recalled, but like something waiting in the room. Ranger lifts his nose toward the ball. Daniel takes it down carefully. There is writing beneath the dirt, a name pressed into the rubber with black marker. Ranger. The dog's ears rise. Daniel kneels and holds the ball out. Ranger moves forward, sniffs it once, then closes his mouth gently around it. The change in him is almost invisible, but Daniel sees it. The tension in his face softens. His eyes no longer scan the room. For one quiet breath, he is not an abandoned working dog in a sealed building. He is beside Nathan again, standing in sunlight on the training yard. Daniel feels something inside him shift. He has spent years believing grief lives only in people. Looking at Ranger, he knows better. Some animals carry absence with the same patience they carry commands. They wait without understanding time. They remain loyal to a voice long after the world stops speaking it. Daniel reaches toward the lower shelf and removes the training logs. The top page is dated 6 years earlier. Nathan's name appears in the handler column. Ranger's identification number is written beside it. Daniel turns the pages. Search drills, detection exercises, behavioral notes. Every entry is precise until the final week, when the handwriting changes. Nathan's name disappears. Ranger's status is marked pending transfer. Then, on the last page, a single line has been added in blue ink. K9 deceased. File closed. Daniel looks at the dog standing beside him with the red ball in his mouth. No, he says. The word is soft, but it fills the hidden room. Ranger is alive, weak, forgotten, and standing only because some promise has kept him standing, but alive. Daniel checks the signature beneath the entry. The name is difficult to read, half covered by a black stamp. He angles the page toward the lantern. Initials appear beneath the date. GP. He remembers the name from the closure records. Gordon Pike, Civilian Logistics Supervisor. The man responsible for transferring equipment, medical supplies, and military working dogs from Camp Ashford. Daniel turns to the veterinary packets. Both are unopened. The printed labels show medication meant for long-term canine care, issued years ago and never used. Ranger should not have been here. He should not have survived here. And yet someone continued leaving water, food, and medicine in this room long after the file said he was dead. Daniel looks at the cot, the marked days on the wall, and the concealed panel. This was not simple neglect. Someone hid Ranger, but someone else may have kept him alive. Ranger drops the ball and nudges the plastic-wrapped recorder with his paw. Daniel picks it up. A strip of masking tape runs across the back. Written in Nathan's handwriting are 4 words. For Daniel, when ready, the storm outside suddenly goes quiet, as though the whole base is holding its breath. Daniel's thumb rests over the play button. He has waited 6 years to hear his brother's voice, and feared it for just as long. Ranger sits beside him, close enough that their shoulders touch. Daniel presses play. The recorder clicks. Once, then fills the hidden room with a low wash of static. Daniel holds it close, afraid to breathe too loudly. Ranger sits beside him with the faded red ball between his front paws, ears raised, eyes fixed on the small speaker as though he recognizes the silence before the voice. A few seconds pass. Then Nathan speaks. His voice is younger than Daniel remembers, lighter, carrying the rough warmth of someone who still believed there would always be another morning. Daniel, if you are hearing this, then I finally ran out of excuses. Daniel closes his eyes. The years between them collapse. He can almost see Nathan leaning against a desk, smiling at the recorder because serious words always made him uncomfortable. I should have told you about Ranger sooner. The message continues. He is not just assigned to me. He is my partner. He notices what people miss, especially when someone is pretending to be fine. Ranger lowers his head slightly at the sound of his name. Daniel reaches out and rests one hand against the dog's shoulder. Beneath the dusty coat, he feels bone, warmth, and the steady rhythm of a heart that has waited longer than it should have. Nathan's voice softens. You would like him, even if you acted like you did not. He has the same stubborn streak you do. He will stand in one place all day if he thinks somebody needs him there. Daniel looks toward the sealed doorway, the empty bowl, and the chain lying open on the tile. The words feel less like a description than a witness statement. The recording crackles. For a moment the voice fades, then returns. There is something happening with the transfer lists. Dogs are being moved on paper before they leave the base. Some files do not match collar numbers. I might be wrong, but if I am not, Ranger could disappear into a system that does not know how to admit mistakes. Daniel's eyes open. He reaches for the training logs and turns back to the final page. K9 deceased. File closed. The initials beneath the entry seem darker now. Nathan continues. I copied what I could. If anything happens to me, do not trust the first report. Check the room behind the east corridor. Ranger knows where the rest is. The message stops abruptly. Not with a goodbye. Not with a final word. Only a hard click, followed by silence. Daniel presses the play button again, but nothing more comes. The recorder has reached the end. Ranger nudges it with his nose, then looks toward the cabinet. That is not all, Daniel says. Ranger rises. His legs tremble, but his attention remains fixed on the back wall of the hidden room. Daniel lifts the lantern and follows the dog's gaze. Behind the cabinet, one section of the wall is darker than the rest, the paint uneven around its edges. He moves the cabinet carefully, inch by inch. A narrow steel hatch appears near the floor. No handle, only a circular key slot and a faded service label. Records access. Daniel's pulse slows in the way it always does when a problem becomes real enough to solve. He takes out the construction plan and compares the measurements. The hatch leads beyond the marked square into a section that should not exist. He reaches for his radio again. Static answers. Then a broken voice pushes through. Mercer, respond. Daniel recognizes Captain Rebecca Hayes. He turns the volume higher. Captain Hayes, this is Staff Sergeant Mercer. I found a live military working dog inside Building 7. German Shepherd, male, identification ranger. I also found altered transfer records. The radio goes quiet. For several seconds, there is only the hiss of interference. Then Hayes speaks, slower this time. Repeat the dog's name. Ranger. Former handler Corporal Nathan Mercer. Another silence follows, heavier than the first. Daniel can hear paper moving on her end, perhaps a keyboard, perhaps a file drawer opening. When Hayes returns, the firmness in her voice has changed. Daniel, listen carefully. Ranger is listed as deceased. I am looking at him. That is not possible. Daniel glances at the dog. Ranger stands beside the hidden hatch, the red ball now resting near his paws. He knows Nathan's signal. I have the original training logs and a recording in Nathan's voice. The radio carries a faint breath. I signed the final report 6 years ago, Hayes says. The medical statement said Ranger died during emergency transport after your brother's final assignment. I never saw the body. I was told the remains had already been released. Daniel feels the room grow colder. The official story had never included Ranger because, according to the paperwork, there had been nothing left to return. A closed file. A finished grief. Something everyone could place in a box and carry away. Who gave you the statement, he asks. Hayes does not answer immediately. When she does, her voice is almost a whisper. Gordon Pike. Ranger lets out a low sound and looks toward the corridor. Daniel hears it a second later. An engine outside. Then another. Through the vent comes the distant beep of a reversing truck. Captain, the demolition crew is here early. Hayes responds at once. They are not authorized to begin until sunrise. The portable lantern flickers. Somewhere above them, a heavy door closes. The radio bursts with static, and Hayes's final words arrive in fragments. Do not leave the records. Do not let anyone seal that room again. The connection dies. Daniel turns toward the open passage. The darkness beyond it is no longer empty. Footsteps move through Building 7, slow and deliberate. Ranger picks up the red ball, walks to the steel hatch, and taps it 3 times with one paw. He pauses, then taps twice more. Daniel kneels beside him and places the recorder inside his jacket. The first mystery has been answered. Ranger was never dead. The deeper question is why someone needed the world to believe he was. The footsteps stop outside the hidden room. Daniel switches off the lantern, and darkness folds around him and Ranger. For a moment, the only sounds are the storm moving across the roof and the quiet pull of the dog's breath. Daniel rests one hand against Ranger's neck. The German shepherd does not tremble. He watches the open passage with the stillness of an animal that has learned patience from men who often mistake silence for surrender. A flashlight beam crosses the corridor beyond the concealed panel, pale and searching. Someone tests the outer door. Metal clicks. Then a voice carries through the wall. Building 7 is clear. Start with the east section. Daniel recognizes the tone before he recognizes the name. Gordon Pike. He had heard it only once during the closure briefing, attached to a polite man in a clean raincoat who spoke about schedules, liability, and efficient disposal. Nothing in the voice had seemed memorable. Now Daniel understands that forgettable can be a kind of camouflage. He waits until the footsteps move away, then turns the lantern back on and kneels beside the steel hatch. Ranger places his nose near the circular key slot and scratches once at the floor. Daniel examines the lock. It is too narrow for the tools in his bag, but the edge of the hatch has weakened with age. He wedges the pry bar into the seam and applies slow pressure. The steel bends with a muted groan. Above them, an engine increases in pitch. The building shivers lightly, sending dust from the vent. Not much time, Daniel whispers. Ranger steps closer as the latch gives. Daniel pulls the hatch open. Cold air flows from a narrow passage descending beneath the wall. 3 concrete steps lead into darkness. The space is barely 4 feet high. Daniel takes the lantern and crawls forward, Ranger close behind. The passage smells of paper, damp wood, and old disinfectant. At the bottom, it widens into a room no blueprint has ever acknowledged. Metal shelves line both walls from floor to ceiling. Cardboard boxes sit in careful rows, each marked with a collar number, a transfer date, and a single word written in red ink. Closed. Daniel moves the lantern across the labels. Some dates are more than 8 years old. Others are recent. He opens the nearest box. Inside is a K-9 training file, a retired collar, photographs, and a transfer order. The order lists a rehabilitation center in Pennsylvania. Beneath it lies an unsigned receipt and a second document reporting the dog deceased during transport. Daniel opens another box. The same pattern, different name, same signature block. Gordon Pike. Ranger walks slowly along the shelves, nose working through the dust. At the far end, he stops beside a stack of black binders. Daniel pulls one free. The pages list payments for transportation, veterinary boarding, and long-term care. Each dog generated months of expenses after the file declared it dead. Money continued moving. The animals did not. Daniel feels anger rise, but it is colder than rage. It is the kind that sharpens rather than blinds. Ranger nudges a lower box. Daniel opens it and finds 5 identification plates tied together with string. Each belongs to a military working dog. One plate is stamped Ranger. Another bears a handwritten note from Nathan. Check collar against chip before transfer. Numbers do not match. Daniel places the note beside the recorder inside his jacket. Nathan had seen the pattern. He had tried to leave a trail simple enough for someone honest to follow. Daniel looks around the hidden room and realizes Ranger was not guarding only a memory. He was guarding evidence. A soft mechanical hum begins above them. The shelves tremble. Fine dust drifts from the ceiling. Daniel raises the radio. Captain Hayes, respond. Static. He tries again. Rebecca, they are starting. This time her voice breaks through, faint but urgent. I am at the main gate. Pike has revoked access and claims there is a structural emergency. I have contacted base security. Preserve what you can and get out. Daniel looks at the rows of boxes. Too many to carry. Too many names to leave behind. He removes his field pack and fills it with binders, transfer orders, and every identification plate he can reach. Ranger watches, then turns toward a side door half hidden behind the shelving. Daniel pushes the shelf aside. The door opens into a narrow utility tunnel running toward the old veterinary wing, an escape route. Before they enter, Ranger returns to the shelves and paws at one final box. Daniel opens it. Inside are photographs of dogs standing beside Marines, each image labeled with a name and date. On top lies a picture of Nathan kneeling beside Ranger in the bright training yard. Nathan's hand rests on the dog's chest. On the back, he has written one sentence. A record can erase a number, but it cannot erase who came home because of him. Daniel slips the photograph into his pocket. The building shakes again, harder this time, and one of the boxes falls open. Collars spill across the floor with soft leather sounds. Ranger stands among them, ears raised, as though surrounded by voices no one else can hear. Daniel shoulders the pack and looks back at the room. We are coming back for all of them. Ranger meets his eyes. Then, from somewhere beyond the tunnel, Gordon Pike's voice echoes through the pipes. Seal the east corridor first. The lantern flickers. Daniel enters the passage with Ranger beside him, carrying the truth Nathan died trying to protect and the names of dogs the world had been taught to forget. The utility tunnel narrows as Daniel and Ranger move beneath the old veterinary wing. Concrete presses close on both sides, damp with condensation and cold enough to sting through Daniel's gloves. The lantern throws long shadows ahead of them, revealing bundled cables, rusted pipes, and faded directional arrows painted on the wall. Ranger walks with measured steps, but the strain is beginning to show. His back legs falter once. Daniel stops immediately and crouches beside him. We can leave the pack, he says. Ranger looks at the canvas bag on Daniel's shoulder, then toward the darkness ahead. He does not move. Daniel understands the answer. The evidence stays. Above them, heavy machinery rumbles across the east side of the building. The vibration travels through the tunnel floor and into Daniel's knees. Dust sifts from the ceiling in pale streams. He checks the radio again. Captain Hayes, I am in the utility passage beneath the veterinary wing. I have files, transfer records, identification plates, and Nathan's recorder. Static swallows most of the reply, but Rebecca's voice pushes through in fragments. Security is delayed at the gate. Pike is claiming emergency authority. Do not return to Building 7. Find the South Service exit. Daniel looks at the painted arrows. South access points ahead, but a thick line has been drawn through it. Beneath the mark, someone has written closed for flood damage. He presses the radio button. South access may be blocked. Then use the medical loading bay, Rebecca answers. It should be 50 yards west of your position. The signal dies before Daniel can respond. Ranger suddenly stops. His ears angle toward the floor. Daniel hears nothing at first. Then water. A slow trickle moving through the darkness. He lowers the lantern. A shallow stream crosses the tunnel, only an inch deep near his boots, but it is flowing from the direction of the south exit. The storm outside is forcing rainwater into the lower passage. They have less time than he thought. Daniel moves forward, guiding Ranger around the deepest section. The water climbs to his ankles, then his shins. It is bitterly cold. Ranger's coat darkens where the current touches his legs. Still, the dog keeps pace. After 20 yards, they reach a steel maintenance door. Daniel pulls the handle. It does not move. He tries again, locked from the other side. Ranger lowers his nose and sniffs along the bottom seam. Then he turns away from the door and paws at a narrow opening between two pipes. Daniel lifts the lantern. A secondary crawl space leads upward at a steep angle. It is too small for him to stand, but it may reach the loading bay. You found another way, he says. Ranger takes one step toward it and stumbles. The red ball falls from his mouth and rolls into the water. The current carries it backward. Ranger turns at once, but Daniel catches his collar before he can follow. No, Ranger pulls weakly, eyes fixed on the floating ball. Daniel sees what it means to him. Nathan's scent may be long gone, but memory lives in shape, touch, and ritual. The ball is not a toy. It is the last order Ranger still knows how to keep. Daniel removes the pack from his shoulder and sets it on a dry ledge. Then he wades after the ball. Water rises nearly to his knees as the tunnel dips. The red rubber turns slowly in the lantern light, moving toward a dark drainage opening. Daniel reaches once and misses. The ball slips farther away. Behind him, Ranger gives 3 short barks. A pause. 2 long ones. The signal steadies Daniel. He braces one hand against the wall, stretches, and catches the ball just before it disappears beneath the grate. When he returns, Ranger presses his nose against Daniel's wrist. "I know," Daniel whispers. "Something's come back with us." He places the ball inside his jacket, beside Nathan's recorder. Then he lifts the canvas pack again. Ranger enters the crawlspace first. Daniel follows on his hands and knees, pushing the lantern ahead. The passage rises through old insulation and broken conduit. Every few feet, the building trembles. A deep metallic thud sounds behind them. The utility door they could not open buckles inward as debris settles in the tunnel. Their way back is gone. Daniel keeps moving. The crawlspace opens behind a removable panel at the edge of the veterinary loading bay. Ranger pushes his nose against it, but the panel barely shifts. Daniel presses both hands to the metal and leans forward. It gives an inch. Cold night air enters through the gap, carrying rain, diesel fumes, and the distant sound of men calling to one another. He pushes again. The panel opens wide enough for Ranger to slip through. The dog steps into the loading bay, then turns and waits. Daniel starts to follow when a shelf above him shifts. A box falls, scattering folders into the crawlspace. He reaches for the pack, but the strap catches beneath a pipe. The files begin sliding toward the rising water behind him. For 1 second, he faces the choice he has spent his whole life avoiding. Save the proof, or save the living soul waiting ahead. Daniel pulls the knife from his belt, cuts the strap, and lets part of the pack fall away. He keeps Nathan's recorder, the identification plates, the photograph, and one binder pressed against his chest. The rest disappears into the dark. When he crawls into the loading bay, Ranger is still there. He has not taken a single step toward freedom. Daniel kneels beside him, breathing hard. "You stayed." Ranger leans against his shoulder. Outside, headlights sweep across the rain. Gordon Pike's voice rises from the far side of the building. "Check the loading bay." Daniel looks toward the open service road, then at Ranger's weakened legs. He could run alone. He could carry more evidence. He could leave the dog for security to find. Instead, he removes his field jacket, wraps it around Ranger's body, and lifts him carefully into his arms. The German Shepherd is lighter than he should be. Daniel feels every shallow breath against his chest. "The records can speak later," he says. "You come first." With the binder tucked beneath one arm and Ranger held close, Daniel steps into the rain. Behind him, the old base shudders under the machines. Ahead, beyond the loading bay, a single set of headlights appears at the main road. Rebecca Hayes has found a way through. Daniel walks toward the light, carrying the witness Nathan trusted and the life no report had the right to erase. Rain strikes Daniel's face as he crosses the service road with Ranger held against his chest. The German Shepherd's head rests beneath Daniel's chin, his breath warm but faint through the wet fabric of the field jacket. Each step carries them farther from Building 7 and closer to the headlights waiting beyond the chain-link gate. Captain Rebecca Hayes stands beside a dark utility vehicle, one hand raised to guide him through the storm. 2 base security officers are with her, their reflective jackets bright beneath the beams. "Over here," Rebecca calls. Daniel does not answer. He saves his breath for the dog. Ranger's amber eyes remain half open, following the movement of light across the rain. "Stay with me," Daniel says. "You have waited long enough." Behind them, an engine falls silent. Gordon Pike steps beneath the loading bay awning, protected by a clean raincoat that seems untouched by the weather. He does not come closer. His voice crosses the distance with the careful calm of a man still hoping authority will sound like innocence. "Staff Sergeant Mercer, that section is unstable. Put the animal down and surrender the documents. This is now a safety matter." Daniel keeps walking. Rebecca moves through the open gate and meets him halfway. Her eyes go first to Ranger, then to the binder beneath Daniel's arm. She removes her coat and spreads it across the back seat of the vehicle. "Set him here." Daniel lowers Ranger gently onto the dry fabric. The dog tries to sit upright, but his strength gives way, and he settles against Daniel's hand. Rebecca checks his breathing and touches the side of his neck. The veterinary emergency team is 10 minutes out. Gordon's voice comes again, closer now. "That dog is not military property. There is no valid record of him." Rebecca turns. The rain runs from the brim of her cap. "That is exactly the problem, Mr. Pike." One of the security officers steps between the vehicle and the loading bay. No one raises a voice. No one needs to. Gordon stops at the edge of the light, where his face appears pale and tired beneath the storm. "You are making assumptions based on damaged files," he says. "Those records were closed years ago." Daniel removes the metal identification plates from his pocket and places them on the vehicle seat beside Ranger. They touch one another with a quiet series of chimes. "These dogs had names," he says. "You closed numbers, not lives." Gordon looks at the plates, and for the first time his calm expression changes. It is not fear Daniel sees. It is calculation. The look of a man measuring how much truth has escaped the room he built to contain it. Rebecca holds out her hand. Daniel gives her the binder. She opens it beneath the vehicle's interior light, turning pages slowly, reading signatures, transfer dates, and payment entries. The security officers exchange a glance. One speaks into his radio and requests that all demolition activity stop immediately. Across the base, machinery powers down one vehicle at a time. The deep vibrations fade. What remains is rain, wind, and Ranger's breathing. Daniel kneels beside the back seat. He takes the red ball from inside his jacket and places it near the dog's front paws. Ranger opens his eyes. His nose touches the worn rubber, and his tail moves once against Rebecca's coat. Daniel almost smiles, but the feeling catches somewhere behind his ribs. He reaches for Nathan's recorder. Water glistens on the plastic wrapping, yet the device still works. The screen shows one file already played and another file beneath it, shorter, unnamed. Daniel stares at the display. "There is more," Rebecca says softly. He presses the button. Static fills the vehicle. Ranger's ears lift. Then Nathan's voice returns, quieter than before. "Daniel, this part is not about the dogs. It is about you." Daniel's hand tightens around the recorder. The world beyond the open door seems to disappear. "I know what you believe," Nathan continues. "You think every person you could not save became proof that you failed. You think leaving a place means leaving people behind. That is not what happened." Daniel looks down. Rainwater drips from his sleeves onto the pavement. Ranger raises his head and rests it against Daniel's wrist. "You taught me that duty means carrying what you can, not punishing yourself for what no one could carry. If something happens to me, do not turn my absence into a sentence you serve for the rest of your life." Daniel closes his eyes. The words enter slowly, finding space his grief had kept locked for 6 years. Nathan's voice trembles with a smile. "You did not leave me, Danny. You carried me farther than you know. Ranger will understand that before you do. Trust him." The recording ends. No music. No final goodbye. Only the rain against the roof and the soft click of the device returning to silence. Daniel remains beside the vehicle, one hand on Ranger and the other holding his brother's voice. He had imagined forgiveness would arrive like an answer, clear and complete. Instead, it comes as a tired dog leaning into him, a sentence spoken years too late, and the first full breath he has taken without guilt tightening around it. Rebecca places a hand on his shoulder. "Daniel." He opens his eyes. At the far gate, red veterinary lights turn into the base. Behind them, Gordon Pike stands quietly as a security officer asks him to remain where he is. The truth has begun its work, but Daniel barely notices. Ranger watches him with the same steady gaze he once gave Nathan in the training photograph. Daniel touches the torn edge of the dog's left ear. "He was right," he whispers. Ranger presses closer. For the first time in 6 years, Daniel believes his brother did not call him back to Camp Ashford so he could relive the past. Nathan called him there so he could finally leave it.